Hoje em dia eu tenho quase certeza que não dá pra fazer mais. Quase certeza. Aí depois eu posso tentar. Olha lá. Caralho, fica teleportando infinitamente, fi. Ah, aqui tá no Void. Acho que no Void dá pra usar infinito isso daí. Não, NC, a roupa do Kratos Mafia, o Taquinius, você dá 50% a mais de dano e sofre também 50% a mais de dano e você ganha o dobro de Red Orbs. Olha, esquipa até o Cavaleiro, velho, isso é louco. Vamos lá. O Kratos nadador usado nas runs? Sim, Dogot. Só que ainda não foi contado essa parte aí no vídeo. Estudante? Joga desse jeito aí?
Alright, where were we? The early 2010s was a slow time period in the history of God of War speedrunning. In fact, there were almost no active runners, but this didn't mean everyone was asleep. Glitching and routing of the God of War series continued as usual, and the late 2012 and early 2013 was like a small glitching renaissance for the game. Among the discoveries were new high jump techniques, as well as increasingly drastic applications of the so-called swimming glitch, which was basically Kratos swimming outside water. After VPZone did the last known segmented in-game time run of God of War at the very end of 2013, the next new runners would emerge more than half a year later, in the autumn of 2014. But at that point, speedrunning itself had changed. Live streaming was now common. Moreover, runs that were timed in real time and done single segment seemed to work the best in a live context. Practically every God of War runner from now on would use this new format, and with it came new rules. The timing in real-time runs started from choosing new game in the main menu and ended upon sitting on the throne in Olympus at the very end of the game. It was hard to compare runs that came before 2013 with runs that came after. God of War's in-game timer stopped counting during cutscenes and menus, and the old segmented runs had an inherent advantage over single-segment runs as well. If you had to try to approximate, Shenmunu's classic 105 run might be around 140 after converting into real time, since all the cutscenes and menus added around 30 to 35 minutes. But it still wasn't quite as simple as that. Speedrunners of this new era now had a real incentive to minimize time spent in the menu or inside cutscenes, which also influenced the route itself. Upgrading Kratos' gear was a pretty slow action in God of War, so upgrading routes became even more minimalist than before, and several new skips were devised for the sole purpose of going around triggers of pre-rendered cutscenes. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, let's return our focus to the autumn of 2014, when two new runners posted in the SDA thread. On the same day, no less. The first of them was Kazumi Yumi. He said he had done a real-time run on easy difficulty in a marathon setting, getting a time of 2:21. Let's have a quick look at it. Kazumi Yumi's original forum post said that he did this run at 3 AM with very little sleep. The empty splits, full of woeful misspellings, were probably made on location just a little before the run. Apparently, Kazumi Yumi had only learned some of the existing speed tactics for the game, making his run a peculiar mishmash of good, bad, and occasionally just plain strange. As one positive example, he did Tyrju's small Hydra heads skip and dealt with big Hydra with relative finesse, even managing to pull off a frame-precise health regen cancel once. But as for tactics that would have been questionable even in 2005, Instead of dealing with minotaurs with an elegant loop of air grabs, he aimlessly slashed at them with blades. For the most part, this run displayed a type of a beginner or intermediate speedrun route through the game. Medusa's Gaze tutorial was escape to get regenerating magic, of course. A lot of other skips were done too, but only the ones that were simple to perform. Skips which only required a plain high jump or two. Kazumi Yumi fought the Siren boss fight using Rage of the Gods at first. This seemed to kill the sirens faster than using level 1 Medusa's Gaze, so it wasn't a bad idea in principle. Unfortunately, Kratos didn't have enough rage to defeat all the sirens, so switching to magic afterwards was still necessary. When doing some skips, like the main Challenge of Hades skip, the runner used Blade of Artemis high jumps instead of faster, regular high jumps. This type of an over-reliance on Blade of Artemis was probably due to how simple these high jumps were to do. It was just a Blade of Artemis air combo that you repeated over and over again without anything too intricate about the timing. Kazumi Yumi fought Pandora's Guardian without additional upgrades, slowly chipping away the boss's health with his level 2 blades and level 1 Poseidon's Rage. Even though the game was set on easy, this took a while. Late game, Kazumi Yumi's main source of damage was Army of Hades level 2. He still hadn't upgraded Poseidon's Rage at all, possibly to ensure that he would have enough red orbs to max out Army of Hades before Ares. By the clone fight, I simply had to give up trying to understand Kazumi Yumi's upgrading routes. He still adamantly refused to upgrade blades or the magics to increase his damage output, almost like some self-imposed challenge. And that was Kazumi Yumi's real-time attack of God of War. The run was clearly a work in progress, but still, it stands out for being the chronologically first recorded God of War RTA, as well as the first run of God of War ever done in a marathon setting.
Porra, essa run horrível foi a primeira
The second runner who appeared in the Speed Demos archive thread was EXE. In his post, he said he had started practicing the game about 2 weeks earlier, and that his personal best was currently 2:15. However, he had played a different category than Kazumi Yumi. EXE has said that he always prefers doing the fastest possible categories in any game he speedruns. In the case of God of War, he gravitated towards runs that were done on easy mode while using a special costume. He proposed the following distinction: New Game runs are without costume, New Game Plus runs are with costume.
E outra coisa, no God 1 existe traje da vaquinha que te dá magia infinita, só que não vale a pena usar, né? A run com o Taquinius vale mais a pena porque você dá muito mais dano, ganha muito mais orbes. E no quesito magia infinita você pode fazer mesmo os glitch, que não é muito difícil, não demora muito não, cara. Então vale muito mais a pena você fazer isso do que usar a roupa que já te dá magia infinita desde o início.
Most God of War games have a separate New Game Plus mode, in which Kratos gets to start his adventure with most of the gear and upgrades already unlocked. While the original God of War did not have such a mode, using a special costume to become overpowered was pretty close to this in spirits, so calling costume runs New Game Plus became the accepted convention. Over the course of 2 months, EXE streamed 3 times a week, grinding hard to improve his own times. There was no competition at all, since Kazumi Yumi had seemingly retired from speedrunning right after his debut run, leaving EXE free to break the world record at least 6 consecutive times.
Caralho, 5 vezes consecutivas. Ele é alemão, né?
Yeah. Oh my god. Oh my god. Wow.
Nossa, olha a diferença de tempo, mano. -3.
Bam.
Master, you can do it.
Come on. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yippee.
Sub 146.30. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Muito fofo.
On 14th of November 2014, he had taken his time down from 2:15 to 1:44. All of these runs were done on the fastest possible category, which meant easy mode and also using the special costume, Tychonius. EXE had used VPSOne's 2013 run as a reference, since it was the first run that was done in these conditions.
É, tá
The
lá ainda.
Tychonius costume gave Kratos twice the attack power. He was so strong in this category that it was possible to skip the Hydra 1 minigame by just continuing to attack the boss while it was stunned. The big drawback of Tychonius was that Kratos' defense became terrible. It was like a high-risk, high-reward
Nossa.
costume.
Wow,
Having a bad
Nossa.
defense shouldn't usually matter that much in a speedrun, but a careless player could still get killed in this category.
almost dead.
É, se tu
Kratos'
vacilar,
power
vai toda
was
sua
so
vida.
high that it was much faster to
Ali
use
foi.
melee attacks than get grabbed by the boss, completely changing the dynamic of this fight from what it usually was.
Ele não usou o quadrado antes do
The
triângulo
small
ali.
box pushing section
dano
afterwards
por
could
nada.
now be skipped with a basic high jump.
Olha lá, o
This
skip.
trick was PlayStation 3 only. Perhaps this version had a slightly more lenient gravity. Still,
Ah,
the
só no
trick
PS3.
was almost frame precise to pull off. EXE needed 3 attempts to get it to work.
Frame exato do Victor Kratos.
At the boss fight of AGNC, the small Hydra heads were skipped as usual. Since Tychonius got 4 times the red orbs, it was possible to upgrade Blades of Chaos to level 2 before the big Hydra,
É,
then
baby.
destroy it in seconds using
Eu lembro
Rage of
quando
the Gods.
fizeram o
This
glitch
was
da
a
cabine pela
tactic
primeira vez,
unique
cara.
to this category only. Instead of doing the sex minigame, EXE decided to get red orbs by opening various chests while
Acho que foi em
progressing
2017,
through
hein, Big?
Athens.
Ah, que foi 2016? Acho que
The
foi
next part
17.
of the game looked quite different from any previous runs. First, EXE got Kratos checkpointed while hanging on a ledge, and then retried from the last
Ah lá, lá, lá,
checkpoints.
lá.
Doing this made Kratos fall down past the ship's loading zone, allowing him to roam freely under the water surface. Normally Kratos couldn't dive before acquiring Poseidon's trident from Challenge of Poseidon. Not being able to dive also prevented players from acquiring swimming glitch from this area early. However, it was discovered in 2012 that collision that was overlaying water in a specific way could push Kratos under the water surface, putting him into free dive mode even without the trident. Armed with this knowledge, it was Satvara who found a suitable spot to start swimming glitch underneath one of the piers.
Ah, então esse glitch foi o
Kratos could now
Satvara
swim
que...
past all obstacles in the
Eu
early
também.
game, theoretically all the way to the sewers of Athens. But runners really needed to get regen magic, and so they had to end the swimming glitch early. EXE only swam up to Medusa and then ended swimming by getting Kratos stone frozen near the ground level. Normally being frozen in air would shatter Kratos upon landing, but it was possible to land safely on sloped floor like this, and from there continue on like normal. After getting regen magic, it was time for the Gates of Athens skip. EXE felt like this was one of the hardest skips in the game due to the blind platforming involved, but on this run he got it first try.
First try, yeah.
Ah lá,
It
velho.
seemed as if the rest of the early game route was pretty much set in stone. EXE bypassed almost everything in Athens with the same series of skips that was already seen in Shenminius' run back in 2008. EXE managed to gather 3000 red orbs before reaching the desert. He used them to upgrade Medusa's gaze to level 2, since it was one of the most effective ways to deal with the Siren boss fight.
Ih, vacilou.
This upgrade helped later
caindo
in
a live?
Pandora's Temple too, for instance in the Wraith fight that awaited right after stepping into the temple lobby.
Vocês perderam alguma coisa aí?
Most of Challenge of Atlas was skipped with Blade of Artemis jumps. However, since this was single segment, EXE
That is-
used an easier version of the first skip and only jumped up to the saw room instead of going all the way to the adjacent corridor too. While climbing up to Challenge of Poseidon, EXE stopped and almost upgraded Blades of Chaos to level 3. He stopped just few tens of orbs
Ainda
short
com
of a new
Poseidon.
upgrade. What madness was this?
Olha lá o Blackout.
In fact, EXE had just set up something called Blackout Glitch. If you upgrade blades to next level and then retry from the last checkpoint, for several seconds after the game resumes,
novo?
Kratos is free to move although the screen is still dark.
Tá normal o OBS aqui.
None of the level triggers can activate during this time, so Kratos can slip past fights unnoticed. EXE used this glitch to go past a trigger near the entrance, skipping a cutscene as well as the first fight.
Aqui é o esquema ali?
None of the
Explicação
level
dele.
triggers can activate during this time, so Kratos can slip past fights unnoticed. EXE used this glitch to
entendi.
go past a trigger near the entrance, skipping a cutscene as well as the first fight against
Ah, tô ligado.
Cerberus.
Eu queria saber por que isso acontece.
EXE could skip getting the crank at the start
Outra
of the
coisa, perdeu o que fazem hoje em dia o do GOT. Então ele upa as Blade, e quando ele upa, ele meio que ignora todos os triggers do jogo. E aí quando ele dá restart checkpoint, ele já passa pelo trigger e volta no checkpoint como se tivesse passado e dado cutscene, mas não deu. Aí ele skipa a cutscene. Não tô maluco sozinho. O OBS tá normal aqui por enquanto, mano.
the sacrifice level by
Se cair,
high
vocês
jumping
falam aí
up
que
to
eu
the
pauso,
cage
mano.
and pushing it off its invisible pedestal.
Socando o molho no chão. Peraí.
Afterwards, Medusa's gaze level 2 and its special move, Gorgon Flash, once again proved most helpful when
E
fending off
ele não
the
esquipou
numerous
o sacrifício,
legionnaire
né?
captains.
Ele poderia ter esquipado, mas não esquipou.
The rest of Challenge of Poseidon was skipped with Blade of Artemis jumps and also swimming through a large part of it out of bounds. The worst part about doing this skip was the camera,
Encheu o
which
saco.
did a lot of uncontrollable
BR, né,
movement
mano?
when
Sei o quê.
swimming close to the level. It was easy to end up back in bounds by accident, but going further away from the level geometry wasn't an option either, since you had to hit a few loading triggers
Ué?
too while doing all this.
Deixa eu ver, esse daqui eu não sabia não.
Bounce by
Ah,
accident,
não, tá.
but going further
Não, vi
away
errado.
from the level geometry wasn't an
É que eu não tinha
option
visto com essa
either,
câmera
since you
ainda.
had to hit a few loading
certo, tá
triggers
certo.
too while doing all this. Since EXE had spent his Rage of the Gods at the Big Hydra, he couldn't use the most direct method of skipping the Archer rope in Challenge of Hades.
Oxi.
Instead, he decided to fight the
Ficou sem
Minotaurs and the
física o
Archers,
Minotaur.
which fortunately didn't take very long thanks to his endless magic and boosted power. A new big exploit had been discovered in the Pandora's Guardian fights. You had to shoot one log that misses at the start of the fights. After that, if you continued shooting more logs, each at a precise time, you would glitch up the boss, forcing it to walk into your every shot, thus skipping almost all the phases of the fight.
Mas eu não tinha
The
feito isso daí
timing for
antes?
this trick was fairly precise, and if you missed even once, it was more convenient to just reset the entire fight to get another try. Also, if you did this glitch too many times, that would make the
Que
fight
ele era só uma
unwinnable.
vez.
EXE then finished off the boss with level 1 Blade of Artemis.
Finalmente usou a Artemis, né, carai?
Thanks to all his
Agonia da
extra
porra.
red orbs, a Tychonius Kratos could easily upgrade Army of Hades to level 3 before Cliffs of Madness, giving an even greater advantage in any future fights. Although it should be added that the run no longer had much fighting due to all the skips.
It was really close.
The bridge was jumped over as usual. EXE did a variation of this skip where he used a blade's long jump to get over to the other side.
Não tinha o paredão. Acho que o paredão só vai aparecer depois que descobrirem como usar o Medusa's Gaze ali.
In general, he could do this skip faster than Shenminyu since his Poseidon's Rage was still level 1 and the animation of the magic was shorter. For the Architect's Tomb, EXE used a variation of the skip that he had discovered himself.
Olha.
It was easier to perform than the classic method, but slower too.
Ah, mas é mais
Instead of
devagar.
skipping the entire tomb, it just dropped Kratos to the final room of the level early.
Acontece, Dogote.
It seems EXE still hadn't learned a good setup for the vertical spike pillars. His movement was hesitant, and for a reason. The slightest contact with spikes would drop Kratos down the entire pillar. Being on world record pace, you could feel the pressure here. There was another blackout glitch near the end of the run to get past the Gravedigger cutscene. It was one of the more difficult skips in this route, as it required you to precisely land on ground near the grave without activating the cutscene. EXE missed the mark, causing him a 20 to 30 second time loss, almost at the finishing line.
É difícil pra porra, mano.
EXE dealt with Ares using Army of Hades level 3 and Blade of Artemis. It was a short but chaotic fight.
Nossa, ele
It's a
levar uma
pity that
marretada na
Rage
cara
of
ali
the
vai toda a vida
Gods
dele.
wasn't available to speed things up. You could only refill Rage by fighting, and Kratos had barely fought any enemies since his encounter with the Hydra. Rematch against Ares had the potential to be very short in this category, but it had a bit of randomness to it. Often runners would retry from last checkpoint if they didn't get the perfect starting attack from Ares. And that was God of War completed in 1:44:34.
A movimentação
It
toda
was
cagada.
clearly the most polished real-time run anyone had done of God of War at that time. EXE certainly was happy with it.
I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it.
But during this time, there was someone watching from the sidelines in discontentment. That was me. I had helped EXE with some of the run's tricks when he was starting out, but eventually his progress became slower and slower since he practiced and did runs of all the 3 games in the main series.
Ele mesmo.
Besides having his effort divided over 3 different games, it didn't help that EXE had originally learned the route for God of War from many older videos showcasing out-of-date tactics. I recall pestering EXE about known improvements in his chat, but it seemed hard getting through to him. He was knee-deep in the grind, in that extremely focused state of mind where it's hard seeing the forest for the trees. I'm not sure at what point I started practicing runs, but I do remember I made progress fast, since I knew the game so well from all the years of glitching. Just a day or 2 after EXE got his 1:44, I uploaded my first run using the new route, taking the world record by 7
Cabrão,
minutes.
primeira run do cara,
During
pegou o
the next
WR por
month,
7
I
minutos.
uploaded 5 more runs, each slightly faster than before, due to better
Engraçado.
playing as well as some additional skips I managed to incorporate into the routes. On 13th of December 2014, I had taken the world record down to 1:24:57. Like EXE, I had also played on easy mode with the Tychonius costume. This run category, any percent New Game Plus, would be the most popular category for all the runners in the years to come. I preferred starting the Hydra 1 fight with a strong attack from a roll.
Olha lá, com o
Kratos
triângulo.
took a hit while doing this, but it also made a good dent to the
Será que
Hydra's
esse
life
pelo canto é
bar.
melhor? Que nem ele fez ali?
A way to skip Hydra 2 was already known since 2012, but it was very finicky. Regardless, I
2012
incorporated
glitch.
this trick into the routes. You had to get a harpy to fly over the railing at the back of the area by blocking its swooping attack at a specific time while doing a jump.
Ele falou que o
You
glitch
would
é de
then do a
2012, mas
fairly
ninguém
effective
fazia nas
magicless
runs.
high jump by grabbing the harpy through the railing, allowing you to get to the next area early. Worst part was that this trick was hard to do consistently. On this run I only got it on my 4th try. After climbing the mast, I used another skip to get to the end of Aegean Sea early.
Nah.
This trick was found by Satvara in 2008 already, but until now it was deemed unwise to use in runs.
2008
The
esse
skip made
glitch!
it possible to never fight Big Hydra, but you would also skip the universally handy damage dealing and high
Buffer. Mano. Voltou aí já?
unwise to
Mano.
use in runs. The skip made it
2008,
possible
esse
to never
glitch.
fight Big Hydra, but you would
Esse glitch de 2008. Só que os caras não usavam na run. Voltou? Voltou? Esse glitch da cabine é de 2008. Só que os caras não usavam na run porque ia skipar o Poseidon, cara. Line Boom. Foi um gênio. Foi o Satvara, velho. 2008, velho. Caralho. Mano. Se os caras tivessem descoberto que dava pra usar a Medusa no lugar do Poseidon... Nossa, velho. Os caras teriam otimizado isso daí há muito mais tempo. Muito mais tempo.
also skip the universally handy damage dealing and high jumping magic, Poseidon's Rage, in the process. From now on, runners would simply have to forego this magic. There wasn't much floor out of bounds, so I played the trick particularly safe, which cost me some time. Overall, it only took me around 5 minutes to get through Aegean Sea, and it wasn't even a very optimal performance.
Por isso que ele
As a
passou
side
7 minutos
note,
do cara lá.
according to
Zax.
the narrator, the Hydra died even though Kratos mostly avoided it. Perhaps it choked to death while eating the boat captain. At the port of Athens, I did the sex minigame, upgraded blades to level 2, and then started early swimming glitch, as usual. My air swimming route to Medusa was streamlined compared to EXE. I only hit the essential loading triggers instead of following the path Kratos normally takes through the level. Besides that, I made sure to hit the trigger for the Minotaur fight that was on the walkway. For some reason, the fight couldn't fully start at the moment, so hitting the trigger only made the background music change for the time being. As for what was my reason for doing this, it would become apparent soon. After acquiring Medusa's gaze and regenerating magic, the next step was to backtrack to the port of Athens. Perhaps Kratos had left something important there. The trigger for the previously skipped Cyclops fight still existed near the elevator, and there was no easy way to get around it from here, so you had to watch a short cutscene before you could leave. The Minotaur fight on the walkway no longer existed thanks to hitting its trigger earlier while swimming, making it faster to backtrack the rest of the way. You probably already guessed what's coming next. Kratos needed to breach the water surface one more time. This time a glitch called Lenient Air Momentum, or LAM for short, was used to do this. If you cancel an air attack by landing on ground or water, there will be some leftover positive momentum that will make Kratos' next jump much floatier. As a mysterious side effect, if you have LAM and then do the attack Apollo's Offensive with a low roof above Kratos' head, Kratos will pass through water surface while descending. Anyway, it was time to go swimming again. It turns out there was actually nothing stopping Kratos from returning back to the pier and starting the swimming glitch again after getting regenerating magic, allowing him to freely coast through the early game. The biggest thing you had to worry about was hitting all the invisible loading triggers while doing this. The camera works in a fairly strange way while swimming in air. The camera angle doesn't update automatically while swimming through areas. However, pressing select forces the game to update the camera, so I sometimes enter the pause menu just to fix the camera angle. Gates of Athens were skipped by swimming past them. Some story cutscenes were skipped. The puzzle room and the pile of rubble were skipped. You could also cut a lot of corners on the road to Athens by swimming over the buildings. God of War attempted to minimize loading screens by making new maps load seamlessly during gameplay. However, if you went through the levels too fast, every once in a while there would necessarily be several seconds of mandatory loading time. In a speedrun, you could use the wait for upgrading your gear, a small optimization that saved seconds here and there. Swimming past the early game was pretty much a necessity when skipping Poseidon's
good.
Rage. It was hard to gain a significant amount of height with Blades of Chaos alone, so without the swimming glitch, some of the early game skips would have been either slower or impossible to do. Athens Town Square was skipped faster
Tá bom,
than ever
legenda aqui?
before. Cutscenes and fights, both outside and inside the Temple of the Oracle, were skipped. The poor Oracle in need of rescue was also ruthlessly swam past. The swimming glitch was finally ended in the sewers of Athens. It was possible to continue swimming all the way to the desert, but Kratos would get stuck there since there was no way to damage the sirens while swimming. Orb collecting was speeded up by a new exploit. If you destroyed a stone-frozen enemy using Plume of Prometheus,
Ah lá, que o Mark
both
falou
the
outro
melee
dia.
attack as well as the explosion left by it would shatter the enemy simultaneously, granting Kratos twice the red orb.
Nossa! Então se
At
tu
least 3,000 red
se
orb.
tu matar o inimigo com esse ataque, você ganha um dobro de Red Orbs. Caso
Orbs
ele tava
were needed
destruindo
before the end of the desert to upgrade Medusa's
Medusa, né?
gaze to level 2, and this was the new best way to go about it. Since Poseidon's Rage jumps were no longer an option, this route relied on a new jump tactic called Blade of Artemis Flash Jump. On the plus side, Flash jumps were faster and more nimble than Poseidon's Rage jumps.
Ah,
The thing with Poseidon's Rage was that it
A Medusa
completely
agora, né?
reset Kratos' air momentum whenever it was cast. Gorgon Flash did no such thing, thus making things like Kratos' speed and angle, as well as the timing of your Blade of Artemis swipes, far more important than before. The weapon system was fairly rigid in the original God of War. Especially airborne weapon switching was limited. However, there existed something called Fuse Glitch, which allowed Kratos to momentarily switch back to Blades of Chaos during a Blade of Artemis air combo. This glitch gave flash jumps a tremendous amount of flexibility. You'd have the benefits of both of Kratos' weapons in air. You could use a double jump in the middle of a flash jump to change directions, or you could use any Blades of Chaos air moves like Hermes' Stomp to finish off your jump. This was truly the Swiss Army knife of jumps, useful for both long and high jumps of any